Divine Truth Assistance Group. Group assistance sessions putting principles of divine truth into action. This recording is from the Understanding God's Loving Laws group and is part of an Education in Love series. In the Human Transformation Principles question and answer presentation, Jesus answers questions from the audience about the material covered in the previous presentation, Human Transformation Principles. Recorded on the 12th of November 2016 in Noosaville, Queensland, Australia.
Okay. You're all ready? I'm not quite ready, but I'll get there. Okay. So our discussion now is the Q&A for the previous discussion, so Human Transformation Principles Q&A, and we'll get started straight away on the questions. So maybe if we could have the first one with Sherry. Where is Sherry? So Mike over with Sherry. And the next one I would like with Yvonne. Where is Yvonne? Over there. So the next one with Yvonne. And we'll go from there. Thanks, Sherry. And now yours, you had a series of 3 questions in a row. Do you remember those? Not the one you recently asked, but the ones you asked afterwards, I think they are. Okay. Could you please clarify? It starts with...
could you please clarify what you mean by the universe?
Yeah, well, that makes sense to clarify that, doesn't it? So let's clarify what we mean by universes. Remember, we're talking about universes, not just universe as well. Universe being a specific area of space that is governed by a collective set of laws that do not allow for anything to go inside or outside of that universe unless governed by higher principles, is my definition of a universe. Now, I said that pretty quickly. What did I mean by it? Well, what happens is, as you know, there's a set of laws that govern each layer of the universe. So the physical universe. Remember, the physical universe includes all of the 35 spheres. So someone else asked the question, in fact you did, do the physical universes include Earth, hells and whatever? Yes, they include Earth, the hells, right? And spheres 1 to 35 of 6 of them. So that's, yep. Yeah, remember I said there's 6 or 7 Earths and spheres surrounding Earth and so forth? That's the physical universe. So it's actually quite large. It's everything you can see matter-wise with your physical eyes in this current universe, right? In its furthest possible extent, right? And inside of that is contained the Earth, the hells, and then there's also what you would call dark matter that can't be seen by the physical eye, but can be seen by the spiritual eye, is also included in the physical universe. Does that make sense? And there's 35 of those surrounding each Earth system. So it's quite a complex system. And then there's a set of laws governing all that. That's what I'm calling a universe.
Thank you.
And I'm saying there's more than one of those. And then I'm saying the soul universe is the universe, which of course now is external because and I'm drawing it concentric circles because that's the best way to illustrate it to you. But the soul universe here is governed by another set of laws that determine what happens in the soul universe, and so that becomes a universe in its own right. But you can see the soul universe contains not only the soul universe but the laws that govern all of the physical universes. Does that make sense? So each universe contains the lower universes in hierarchy. Remember, everything's hierarchical, so it contains everything in lower hierarchy. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You asked a question also about personal responsibility. Can you remember it?
Does our personal responsibility increase pretty much in direct ratio to our knowledge,
Our awareness?
our awareness of God's laws, and
Yeah. Remember, personal responsibility is about desire. It's not about actual responsibility. It's about what you desire to be responsible for. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Now, obviously, the more aware you become, the more you can potentially desire. So therefore, your personal awareness, your personal level of responsibility is proportional to your awareness, because what you become aware of, you can now desire. You can't desire things you're unaware of.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Does everyone get that? You can't desire things that you're unaware of. So before you met me, you didn't know that, many of you didn't even know that transformation was possible, right? So you can't desire something that you're not aware of, so you didn't desire it. But now you've heard about transformation, now you know it's possible, now you can desire it or not, depending on the choice now. But before then, you didn't really have a choice because you didn't know. So personal responsibility is proportional to awareness. It needs you to become aware in order for you to become responsible. But remember, part of the responsibility principle is that it's the law-governed, you're forced to want awareness. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now that can happen at any point in your development and awareness. You can be a little child. In fact, many small children have far more desire to become aware than we do as adults.
Yep.
So they are in a greater level of self-responsibility, even though they can't necessarily care for themselves and so forth at that stage. They are at a greater level of self-responsibility than most adults, from God's measure of self-responsibility. Because self-responsibility is all about desiring awareness. And many children have a large desire for awareness, which we as adults then suppress. Right? So obviously, you could say that while personal responsibility does grow in proportion to awareness, in other words, you cannot be responsible for something that you're not aware of, you can also see that a child is unaware of many things, but it has a high level of self-responsibility because it desires to know what it's not aware of. So can you see there's a number of factors with regard to self-responsibility and how that plays out in all of these human transformation principles and all the redemption principles even. So you can't tell yourself that just because you didn't know that you have no responsibility. Because a child doesn't know, but a child wants to know. And God's measuring your want to know, not whether you know.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And that's what we need to become aware of ourselves. Do you want to know about these things? Do you want to know more? Or are you just going, no, it's all right, I can figure about that. Now, what I notice most of you doing with regard to soulmate issues is you're in a state where it's purposeful lack of awareness. You want to remain ignorant because you want to control your current life. You want to have a limit. You want to limit potential of harm, what you believe is harm, through love. You want to limit the pain that you believe love has brought you in the past, and as a result of that, you are purposefully desiring ignorance. Now, you cannot then say that you are unaware, because it's a purposeful choice for ignorance. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very important to see those distinctions. Now, the reason why I raise that, even though it's a responsibility question, is because human transformation depends upon desire. And awareness, self-awareness, the desire for self-awareness, which is in a child, wanting to know, that's the desire. And that's what we need to get back to, the same kind of desire we had as children to discover the universe around us and find out more and just keep absorbing new information and comparing and testing that information, just like a child would do. Now, when we stop that process, we've stopped it for a lot of reasons. Anger is a big reason for stopping that process. This is one reason inside of yourself. Anger is a big reason for stopping that process. Fear is another big reason for stopping the process. But from God's perspective, they are not reasons. They are sins. Right? Because they are out of harmony with the principle of desire. And remember, anything out of harmony with any principle is a sin. Yeah. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yep. That's good, thanks for that, Sherry.
Thank you.
Yvonne is next. You've got 2 questions, Yvonne, and I will answer both. Thank you.
Okay. What other divinely infinite potentials are offered to the human soul, and is that driven by desire?
Well, let's answer the second question first. Are the potentials of the human soul driven by desire? Yes, of course they are. So God even offering them is driven by somebody having a desire.
And from what you've just said, an awareness comes before that.
Yes, you need to become aware before you have a desire, because if you're not aware of what could be offered, then you won't desire it. Does that make sense? Now, God's trying to share awareness by giving us lots of little pointers here and there, throughout the universe. The fact that, on Earth, the majority of us get together with a partner. That's an indication that God's demonstrating to us that we all desire to have a partner. Why is that? Maybe it's because we actually have a partner that God's already made for us. But us desiring to have our partner of any kind is in a way leading us to that awareness. You see what I'm saying? So God's done a lot of things to promote awareness in the universe, but it requires people with desire to notice those things. Go, oh, that's what that is. That now I can desire that. So I'll try desiring that and see what happens. I know the principle of desire will give me answers if my desire is pure and in harmony with God's principles and laws. So I'll desire that and see whether I get it. And that's how you work out things. Does that make sense?
And so that's true of these other potentials that he wants to offer us.
Yes.
We need to be aware.
The truth is God is already attempting to make us aware of them through what he has already shown us and demonstrated and created in the universe. It's just for the majority of us, we're not very observant. We're so selfish and self-absorbed that we hardly can see what's going on in front of our nose, let alone what's going on in the universe around us, right? Mm-hmm. And so we need to learn to see and observe and check out everything and ask and reflect upon it. How does that affect me? What's going on here? What potential might that be? All these different questions we need to ask ourselves, and we can begin then learning that, there's these things perhaps that God is offering. I'm just becoming aware of them, and if I exercise desire, I'll be able to work out whether it's true or not, whether God is actually offering those things or not. Mm-hmm. See? But it starts... All the potentials that are built into the soul are built upon desire, remember? So without the desire, you're never going to have them. Mm-hmm. With the desire, you'll discover what is available and what isn't. But without desire, you'll not discover anything. Mm-hmm. That's why desire is so powerful.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. And your second question?
Why create external potential and internal potential to understand God, receive communications and substances from God?
Okay, this is in reference to one of the objectives of the law of transformation. So why create internal and external potentials? Well, the reality is, firstly, for the soul to receive God's love, it has to have the internal rules that govern how God's love might be received built into it. Does that make sense? Yeah. So there has to be a whole heap of inbuilt rules in the soul that govern what happens when a substance of God is received by the soul. Mm-hmm. And those laws had to have been created before any of us ever received God's love, because otherwise we couldn't even receive God's love into the soul, just as a physical mechanism. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Those laws also had to determine what happens to the soul once the love is received. So those laws the inbuilt rules of the soul had to determine if God's love is received, this is what will happen to the soul. these particular growth or whatever transformation is going to happen. And those rules had to already be defined in the soul before any of us received God's love. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So there had to be a set of internal properties which are governed by internal rules built into the soul that allows us to receive substances outside of the soul from God that can then go into the soul. There must be laws governing that, right? Makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Now, so that's one half of the equation. The other half of the equation is, how does God's love get to the point of being able to enter the soul? There's got to be some external rules outside of the human soul that govern how God's love can flow from God's soul to our soul. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just in the same way we have external rules for any communication.
Spot on. Remember, scope applies to all creations. Therefore, scope applies to this creation and the interaction we have with God.
Mm-hmm.
So scope has to be applied to this creation. And so that means that there must be external rules. Example of one such external rule is the laws governing the Holy Spirit and its operation. That's an example of an external rule that governs how love gets from God's soul to our soul. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's an external rule. That's an example of an external rule governing our creation. And then the internal rule, there's internal rules that govern our soul's capacity to receive and also the soul's capacity for growth. What happens to the soul when it receives divine love had to also be predefined inside of the soul itself.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
As a genetic, you could call it almost a genetic process. Otherwise, the soul would be unable to receive God's love and God would be unable to transmit it.
And does that mean you'd need the external rules for us to pray to God to receive God's love?
That's a part of the external rule, yes. Yep. That there's something comes from within us, which is desire, which we call a longing for God's love. The longing for God's love, it somehow gets transmitted to God, so there had to be some external rules that allowed our emotion to enter God. Mm-hmm. Right? Now that's quite easy if you think about it, because we're within God, so obviously God can just be sensitive to what's going on within him. And then the reception had to occur, which means that we need to allow God's love to be transferred to our soul, and the mechanism had to be available somehow through some laws. Otherwise it wouldn't work.
Okay. Thank you.
Make sense?
That's great. Yeah.
So you can see again, it's all quite scientific and mathematical if you want to think of it that way. It's all quite, based upon logic as well with regard to how rules are created and so forth. It's just an advanced way of thinking about what prayer really is. Now, it's far easier to teach a group of people about longing for God's love than it is to explain all the mathematical processes and laws involved in what that entails, right?
Yeah.
Hence, I've not explained it before in much detail. But there are obviously very complicated mathematical formula determining all of these laws and rules and determining how this love is transferred and received by the soul and what it does inside of the soul as a result, how it actually changes the soul.
I have questions about the mathematics, but I'll submit them.
Yep, no worries.
Thank you.
Good day. Now, who's next? Thalia, can I have you? Where are you? Yes. And Maxine, where's Maxine? Yep, and Maxine will be afterwards. Thanks.
I can't remember the exact wording of what I wrote, so I can try.
I can, because you've written it here. It's, why has God created us to need him?
Oh, yes, that's the one.
God hasn't. God has not created us to need him. We don't need him. Why do you think we do need him?
I guess I was going on the redemption principles in terms of, us needing God to, I guess, redeem ourselves in a faster process.
But isn't redemption principles on the divine redemption driven by desire and not need?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so he desires us to desire him, but he does not need us to need him. You see the difference?
Yes.
Yep. Many of us have this problem because in our relationship we think we have desire for our other half, but when we really only have need for the other half, you know what I mean? So we often get a bit mixed up between need and desire. There's a big difference between the two.
Yeah.
Right? God has not created us to need him. He has created us with the potential to desire him based upon our choice. Right? That's what he's created, with this potential to desire him. Now, if we desire to move beyond the sixth dimension, then we do need God in the sense that we need to have this connection. We need to desire the connection. Now, why has God created that? Why has God made it that way? Well, there's quite a lot of reasons if you think about it. Because you can see through the way in which God has created the universe, you can see that the universe had to be created within him. Can you see that? The reason why, if you have an infinite being, then infinite contains all other things. So the universe had to be created within him. There was no alternative to that. Do you follow? An infinite being must contain all other things. So the universe has to be contained within God. There's no other choice. We have to also be contained within God. There is no other choice. An infinite being, by definition, must contain all other things. Right? So God had to create us within him. He couldn't create us external to him, because to do so would be to create external to the infinite, which is impossible. You follow? So God had to create us within him, and therefore also create all universes within him, and all laws within him, and all other things within him, and all other potential universes within him, and all other potential existence of any creature within him. That's the only option of an infinite being. That makes sense? From a mathematical perspective, a logical perspective. So that being the case, can you see we automatically now share in some things as a result of being within God? Yep?
Yep.
Automatically. And that is the only alternative, because an infinite being can only create within, therefore we are contained within the infinite being. And therefore many of the things that we can do are going to be contained within the restriction of what the infinite being can do. Now, of course, the infinite being infinite, has no restrictions. So isn't that wonderful? It means that we, potentially in the long run, also have the potential for no restrictions, except that we still remain contained within the infinite being. That is really the only restriction, is it not? So, from a theoretical perspective, our only real restriction is that we will always be within the infinite being. That is the only real, definite thing we know for sure about our future potential. Everything else is subject to whatever the infinite being can do. Now that gives us quite a lot of scope, doesn't it really? Quite a lot of power and energy and like all sorts of potentials, but we're still going to be within the infinite being. But please do not consider that God needs you, and God did not create you to need him. To do so would be against one of God's fundamental principles, which is the love-based principle. Everything should be based on desire. Yep. Not need. Make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Maxine.
When you say we are penalised for not knowing, example, I didn't know, and we were all believing what our parents and our teachers and etc. had taught us, and how and why do the gullible children be penalised for that? And please explain why it feels unfair.
Yep, no, I've got you. That's good, honest question. Okay. Imagine you're you're a person who's driving along the highway, and just off the side of the highway there's this fantastic playground that you've never heard of before and you don't know about it. What are you probably going to do? You're driving along the highway, you can't see this thing, you can't see this fantastic playground over there. It's there, but you can't see it. And you're driving along, you're obviously going along the highway for some other reason. You're driving along, it's there, but you can't see it. What are you going to do? You're not aware it's there. You're going to keep driving, right? Aren't you?
Yeah.
Right, so here we are, we're driving along our highway of life, and there's this great big playground here on the side road there somewhere. We can't see it, we don't know it's there, so we're driving along the highway of life, we're unaware, so are we going to go to that playground?
No.
No, we're not. All right? To go to this playground, somebody needs to have told us, or there needs to be some way in which we become aware. Do you follow?
Yeah.
All right. Now, I've just previously said that God created a universe to help us become aware. So in other words, he's provided all these milestones. Like you could think of it like this. Here's a sign. Playground ahead. Do you know what I mean? You're driving on the road, playground ahead, to the left, 3 kilometres.
That's if you can read, right?
Do you know what I mean? Now you have the potential to become aware, but you could have your head turned another direction while you're driving past and that sign went past and you didn't see it, right? Isn't that not true? Could have. So you're still unaware. So God now puts up another sign, playground 2 kilometres ahead, whatever. And you could have been just talking to your friend in the passenger chair there, passenger seat in the car, and drive past and didn't see that sign either. Right? And then there's this great big airplane driving overhead, you know, with a big sign behind it, playground here, like. But you're driving on the ground and you're not looking up. So you're driving along, unaware still. You follow me? So now I'm still unaware. Now God's provided these little indicators to every person. It doesn't matter whether you're a child or an adult or somebody who's experienced a life with your mum and dad who have been quite shut down, or it doesn't matter about all those things. The same signs are there for everyone. They're all there. They're there for me in the first century, just like they're there for you now. Do you understand? God's provided to everyone because God is not, he doesn't believe in inequality. Everything is equal. He's providing you the same signs as he's providing me. Exactly the same. Now, I had some damage to family in this life and in the previous one on earth. And God provided them the same signs as he provided me. And he's providing you the same signs. So can you see the signs that God is providing isn't dependent upon the teachers you have? Do you understand?
Yeah.
It's dependent upon your ability to be observant of what is going on around you. Now, sure, some of the things your parents do could cause you to shut down this observational process. But it's pretty hard to shut it down full on, isn't it? Like, there's things happening to you all the time. And this is only one of the things, you know, some of these big signs are actually in creation itself. Some of the big signs are actually spirits who actually try to influence your choices and decisions, whether that be visible or invisible, because both of those things happen. Some of the signs could be other people who have got ahead of you in the road and they've already seen it's there and they're trying to tell you, it's there, it's there, it's there. And all it requires from me is my openness to, like a child, to become aware. And it's completely independent of how I've been taught. So, for you, this somehow feels unfair. But to me, it seems pretty fair. Why does it feel unfair for you?
Because I didn't know.
Because you didn't see the signs.
Because I didn't see the signs.
Yeah. And you haven't been taught to observe the signs and haven't... But the fact that you're here means that somebody caused you to see one of the signs.
I observed my crazy family a lot.
Okay, so you became...
And I went, I ain't going to be like that.
Okay, you became aware, even though the family taught you a completely different thing.
Yeah.
So the reality is you're not really penalised for their choices and decisions, because the same amount of things are happening to make you aware that have been happening to make them aware. What penalises us is our lack of self-responsibility, our lack of desire for awareness. Can you see that? And this is what affects the human transformation principles the most. Our lack of desire for awareness causes us to not be aware. The divine truth has been available for 2,000 years on this planet already. You think by now it would be a well-known fact. But what does that tell us about the human's condition of awareness? We obviously desire to be unaware. We think that ignorance is bliss, but it's not. Right? And so this should be a major lesson for most of us, right? Should be a major lesson to go, hang on a sec, if this truth's been around for a couple of thousand years and I didn't hear about it until recently, it should have been something you heard soon after you were born, right? So why wasn't it? It was because the previous generation of people also wanted to remain unaware. Can you see why God values self-responsibility, which is the law-based enforcement of awareness? That's why he values it. So don't think that you're actually penalised for not knowing. You're only penalised for trying to remain unaware.
Yeah. Can I ask something else?
See the difference, though?
Yeah.
Yep, Maxine? Yep.
The self-responsibility, I wasn't taught that either. Like a lot of parents will do everything for their child.
I agree they will, but at the end of the day, as you grow up and become an adult, they give up doing that sooner or later. And they say, you're on your own now.
Yeah, I had no idea when I moved out of home. Didn't know how to cook, clean.
But you did move out of
I
home.
did, yeah.
And so then you learnt how to cook, clean, care for yourself and so forth, right? It's a natural state of your growth, is it not? Mm. So again, even though your parents didn't know to teach you these things or didn't even bother teaching you these things, you had to become aware because the law, God's laws, are drawing you into this state of awareness. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So don't think that just because your parents failed, that it means that you don't have a chance. It doesn't. It means that you have the same chance they had.
Yeah, that's why I'm here now.
Yeah, and you decided to become aware of it and decided to embrace it. So you're already ahead of the game. Even though your parents didn't start you off too well with it. And so you can't say that you're being penalised by God for that lack of awareness in your parents' case. Can you really? So there has to be, what I'm getting at, there has to be an emotion that's driving this feeling you have where you're not actually seeing what God's actually done with all the signs that God's put around the place, drawing you to a place. So stop worrying about, it took me 30, 40 years to become aware. Start worrying about what are you going to do now you're aware? You see? Are you going to help other people be aware? Or are you just going to go, I'm aware, but I'm too afraid to mention it to anybody else because whatever fear you have, whatever fear-based reason. You see, you can help the awareness of others, can you not? You can be one of the signs that the playground exists and that people need to become aware of it. Now, the best way to be one of those signs is to actually do it. And people observe you doing it, see the changes in you and see the transformation that occurs. Now they probably won't, they're not just, you're not going to have to make them aware, they're going to go, look what's going on with her, I've got to ask her what's going on. They'll want to be aware themselves. You see? So I feel that, just be careful with these kind of questions, Maxine, because they're they're not an exact... They're coming from a condition of error where you already believe God is not doing all these things God has already done to lead you to a condition that far exceeds your parents' current condition. Do you see? So God's already done a whole heap of things, and you need to see, God's already done it. I'm here, grieving about the fact that why didn't God look after me regarding this problem? Why did I have to have these terrible parents that caused me to, treated me so badly, which your parents have done.
And siblings.
Yeah. But the reality is God's always been trying to make them aware and you aware, and you, unlike them, have chosen to see the sign. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Interesting, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Let's put that down. Sherry, we've done. Kira, we've done. This we've done. Some of these questions I've already answered, so I'm just going to skip the ones that I haven't. So, Shula, where are you? Up the back there. You'll be next. And David, Raizman, where are you? You're in front of us, so you can go straight to you afterwards. You've got 2 questions, Shula, both good. So let's look at your first one, if we can.
What do you mean by external and internal potentials to understand God and receive substances from Him?
Yes, so firstly, can I say with that question, can you see my answer to Joy?
Yeah.
Yvonne answers really that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. So you can see why God had to create external laws that allowed for potentials and internal laws in the soul that allowed for potentials to exist before these transformational principles could actually be engaged.
Yeah.
Yep. So the next part of your question?
How are they different and what effect do each have on the soul?
All right. So I think with that particular question, again, I've answered that pretty well, I think, in the answer I gave to Joy. You can see the difference between an external rule, example is the Holy Spirit, and an internal rule being the potential of the soul to receive love. Somehow it has to be able to let it in side of ourselves. So you can see that there must be laws that govern each, and therefore there are internal potentials of the soul and external potentials of the soul that govern these interactions. Yep. Okay, so, sorry. It must reset itself for that because I did change that yesterday. Sort of goes to sleep after one says, "You're not using me, what's wrong?" I'll use you, and then it's...
So, second question?
It's commanding me to do things. This terrible... this creation is forcing its creator to... I hate devices like that. It's like when you open the car door and it beep, 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 beep until you close it. Why? I want to be in control of my creation, not my creation be in control of me. Like, I often get very frustrated with those kind of devices, but anyway, fire away, Shula. The second question.
Do we begin to transform as soon as we have received God's love? If so, do we appear different to the other spirits who have not and are in the same sphere up until the 6th?
Yes. Now you also put in there about the 7th sphere and things, so I'll answer those questions too. So you don't have to shorten your questions. I'm fine to.
I didn't write that bit down. Actually,
oh, you didn't. Do we begin to transform as soon as we receive God's love, or is it just when we move to the 7th sphere that we begin to transform? Obviously, the moment you receive God's love, you are beginning to transform. God's love is a new substance that doesn't exist within your soul. It automatically, as soon as you receive it, and you remember you can receive it from any condition, from a hellish condition through to any condition. So under those circumstances, if you can receive God's love, it will begin to transform you, but this is with one proviso. And you know what that is? If you let it. If you let it. How do you let it? By feeling everything that it brings up. That's how you let it. So how do you close it down? By choosing to not feel everything it brings up. That's how you close it down. So the reality is there are many people who receive a bit of God's love. it starts triggering them emotionally, and they, due to their beliefs about emotions and other things like that, they shut down the emotional experience. Although they've received some of God's love, they are not letting it do its transformational work. They are using their will to shut down the natural process of the soul to transform. So that soul will be stuck, not receiving any more divine love until they let it do its previous work that it came into the soul to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so your will is still involved. You have control over the energy systems of your own soul. So God's love enters your soul. It starts the transformational process of the soul. But if you don't let it do its work, and one big way I notice most people not letting it do its work is they do not act in harmony with the truth of it. So what they do is the love in them now says, do this, and they go, no, I'm not going to do that. And that's how you shut down its process of transformation. Now, that still means, though, that God's love exists within that soul now. So that soul really, even though it's not aware yet, is in a state where it's now immortal. It can't lose that love now that it's in there. So it's still going to benefit the soul in the long run. But they need to learn that their will has to now be engaged to live in harmony with what the emotion within dictates.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that might take them a while, right? In fact, I notice many people who receive divine love on earth, they don't let that happen until they arrive in the spirit world.
Mm.
A lot of people on earth don't feel safe enough or have not enough ethics or morality or enough desire for truth to allow God's love that has entered them to transform their life in these other areas other than just feeling gooey about love. Do you know what I mean? So when we receive divine love in the initial stage, the first few days we feel quite overwhelmed by it, quite happy, joyful, but then it starts acting upon our soul and starts getting us to do things that we're not that happy about doing, including doing things like telling the truth, feeling emotion, and so forth. And so what do? We come up to a situation where that love inside of us is motivating us to tell the truth, but what do? We don't tell the truth. We come away, and of course we're going to come away, and what are we going to feel? A little bit bad, because the love inside of me is saying, tell the truth, and I made a choice to not tell the truth. Now the love inside of me is different to what I'm doing. So I'm going to feel a little bit bad about that. That's the penalty of acting out of harmony with the love that's within.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
And this is a common condition for people who have received divine love. There are many millions and millions of people on earth who have received divine love. Many millions. But very few of them continue to do so, because they engage one of the control-based mechanisms within the soul to control the effect of what that love is trying to do to the soul. You follow? Yeah. So what they do is they receive some of the love, but they don't tell the truth. They receive some of the love, but they don't change some fundamental belief systems that are now challenged by this love. This happens to Christians a lot, where they receive some of the love, but the fundamental belief system they can go to war for their faith has not been changed. And so when they feel their faith might be challenged, they go to fight for it. They go into battle for it, even if it's just emotional battle. They go in for it, right? How many Christians have you met who don't do that? There's very few, right?
Yeah.
Because they have a belief that's what they have to do, so they do it. That is out of harmony with the love that's in them. They feel bad about it, they get angry about it, you know what I mean? So there's all these internal emotions that get stirred up now about it. But in the end, because they don't want to let go of that belief that the love itself is actually now trying to transform, right? And they're not going along with that, giving up of that emotionally, they are going to retain that belief now probably for the rest of their life and prevent God's love from flowing into them more as a result of retaining it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they cause their own stagnation. even though they have some divine love within them. Now, it's important to understand then how the soul controls the response to the transformational effects of the love entering it. Do you see? Now, in the Paget messages, we tried to share with James Paget many, many times these problems, right? And in fact, there are some messages that got through about this particular issue, about how the human acts as if no love has been received. And in fact, there are some messages that talk specifically about that, how you can act as if you haven't received any love. That is because you're not allowing the transformational effect, because you're not operating in harmony with others of God's principles. And the love internally is desiring you to do it. And so every time you don't do it, you feel a little bit bad about it. Right? And depending on how much love you received, you'll feel a little bit or more. And if you received a lot of love, you'll feel a lot bad about it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? It just depends on how much love you've actually received and how much you're working out of harmony with that love as to how bad you're going to feel. So it is possible actually to receive God's love and then feel bad because you're acting or choosing to make decisions and choices to sin that is now opposite to the love that you've actually received. Important to understand that fundamental problem. So I like the question, Shula, because it's sort of like, do we begin to transform as soon as we receive God's love? Yes. How we continue to transform is the question.
Yeah.
And to do that, we must learn to act in harmony with what that love demands of us.
Right.
And when I say demands of us, it sort of motivates us more than demands. You understand?
Yeah.
And in the Paget messages, we did use the term demands, but it's more like a motivation. It feels like the internal motivation is do this, and you're going, no, I don't want to do it. You might be afraid, or you might honour your fear, or you might, feel that you might get in trouble, or you might have other emotional reasons why you refuse. And any one of these refusals is now going to cause a stagnation to your reception of more love, but also acts then like the love can't do its work inside of you anymore. As many of you have actually, unbeknown to yourself, gone through this experience where you've actually received some of the love, but the love's not motivating you to do any more because you're shutting down its motivations. Does that make sense? For whatever reasons, fear or lack of truth or whatever it is, any one of the principles we've in fact discussed could be a factor. And as a result, there are limitations now placed on your transformation.
Thank you.
Remember, complete transformation cannot occur without desire. And that means desire to act also in harmony with the love you receive. And what we're hoping to achieve in this group, in this assistance group, is to demonstrate to you the principles of love, so that you can see when you might be out of harmony with those principles and therefore shutting down the love you've received. So hopefully that's helpful in that process.
Yeah.
Now, the second part of your question, Shula, was, do we appear different to other spirits who have not received God's love but are in the same sphere as us? Yes, we do, interestingly enough. The love inside of us is like a shining bright light, even if it's just a tiny little speck. It's a shining bright light that automatically illuminates your soul, even though your condition in all other respects might be identical to another person in that sphere. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You can't hide it. You can only choose to ignore it. So when you see it as a spirit, you can see that person's received God's love, that person has not. That person has not. It's quite easy to see, even if it's just in the hells. You're looking, that person has not. And you can then also see the mechanisms they're trying to use in order to shut down its operation and its transformational process, right? But yes, it is potential that two people in the same sphere, and this happens all the time, by the way, because the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth spheres are populated by people who have received God's love and people who haven't. And so a person who has can easily identify another person who has.
Yep.
Yep. which is great. And you also feel an attraction to those people because you feel more like you can share the same information and discuss the same things and so forth as a result of those feelings that you identify within the individual. Yeah. But it's interesting to know that, isn't it, in a way? Because it's interesting to see that once you get to the spirit world, if you test this out, you'll be able to measure or see when a person has or when a person hasn't. Now, you know what happens with most people in addiction when they pass in the spirit world? They don't bother testing any of those things. They're too busy getting their addictions met to bother about testing anything. Hence, dealing with addiction while you're on earth and getting rid of it is going to be very helpful for your life in the spirit world.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question, Shula. Thank you. Now, David Raizman is next. Now, you've asked a lot of questions, David. If we can start with the first one, can a soul in a transformed state? That one. Mm-hmm.
Can a soul in a transformed state enact permanent change in a desirous soul, or would this break the responsibility principles?
Right, so really what you're saying is, like, if we've got a soul, I might just rub off the playground now. Sorry about that. The playground's been destroyed. Nobody can go there anymore. All right. So we're basically asking this question. And here we have a soul in a transformed state. So they are now in a self-aware state. And we've got a soul here, which let's just draw it a bit differently because it's not yet developed, it's not yet aware. So we'll just draw a bit of a line between where it sort of doesn't aware of itself, therefore it's not aware of each half and things like that. So, and what you're asking is, can this soul that's transformed get this soul to make some permanent changes through some kind of activity or action?
Yeah.
Okay, what do you think the answer is?
No.
No, why? You said this soul has to be, in the question that you asked, you said this soul has to be in a desirous state, didn't you?
Yeah.
Now, if this soul is desirous, which is a faith-based state, is it not?
Yep.
Is it? Then what would the answer be? Yes. The answer would be yes. Because this soul, acting out the laws of God, will be responding to the faith-based desirous state of this soul, and therefore anything this soul has can be transmitted to this soul, can it not? But as long as there's a faith-based desirous state. That's the requirement, in fact. Now, in the first century, that's how I healed people. There was a faith-based desirous place in their soul for the healing and the recognition of the cause of sin. And as a result, that they became in harmony with the flow of love that could be transmitted to heal their body. So the person in the higher state can transmit that to the person in the lower state and therefore cause a permanent change or a temporary one. Depends upon how the desire remains, does it not? If the desire remains, then it will be permanent. If the desire gets shut down, they've now got what they wanted and they don't desire anything else, it's temporary. It just depends on what the choice is. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah? Any questions about that? No? Mary, so let's put Mary's...
So, in that state though...
Which state?
The first century state.
Yes.
Where you were able to heal people.
Yeah.
This wasn't our personal energy. Our personal... like our desire was in harmony with God's, was it not? And so was it our personal...
Well, the soul is transformed, so you can't... You could say
God's love within
it's got God's love in it, and therefore it is its personal energy, the way it's using God's love for the rest of its existence.
Mm-hmm.
So it is its personal energy. A soul without God's love obviously doesn't have God's love in it, and so it could use its personal energy still. The reality is any soul can do this. It doesn't matter whether you're in or out of You could be, one soul could be in the first sphere and the other one could be in the hells, and you can do the same thing. It's not dependent upon your condition so much as the desire.
But are you referring to a redemptive process where sin is actually removed from the desirous person? Or are you talking about the removal of effects?
Well, effects under God's law cannot be removed without a cause being removed.
So you are speaking about the removal of sin
Of the cause, yes.
Of the cause.
Yes.
That's
But as
from
long as the
desirous
person is... See, that's the key thing, isn't it? The faith of the individual. That's why I said you cannot be healed but without faith. The person had to have faith before they could be healed, because faith is the desirous position of the soul engaging the principle of desire, which allows for other things. Remember, the redemption principle is based upon desire or will. So redemption principle based on desire, transformation principle based on desire. I can help you transform quite simply, even if I'm in the first sphere and hardly have received any love at all. You know how I can do that? I can just tell you that it's possible. Mary's all complicated. I can just tell you it's possible. Let me finish, Mary. I can just tell you it's possible. And what has that done? It sort of triggers inside and you go, maybe it is possible. Right? Now, as soon as you start thinking, maybe it is possible, what starts to happen? Remember we had a little chart comparing will and desire a few days ago? And when we talked about self-responsibility, you start thinking, all that has to happen is will and desire have to be different before a change can happen. Me just going, maybe it is possible, is a shift in my desire. Now I have a greater potential of engaging the desire and therefore have a greater potential of actually doing it. Isn't the person who's in the first sphere who told me about it, now haven't they helped me heal in some way? Of course they have. Because that just by sharing the thought. Didn't we say thought is energy? Just by sharing the thought of the potential possibility, they have created within me a shift in my desire, which now makes the potential reception possible. It's like one of the signposts I was talking about with Maxine, isn't it? Just a little signpost given by a person that's hardly in any better, different condition than myself, but they made me think something that I didn't think of before. And that's now causing a transformational process that is permanent, as long as I continue to engage my desire. Yeah? So what problems do you have with that, baby?
None, darling.
No.
No. But I think that from your discussion with David, I was feeling that there was an implied energetic exchange, that the soul...
There is an implied
there
energetic
is,
exchange.
I can see that in that example you just gave.
Yes, the thought is an energy exchange.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which entered the person is now permanently within them.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes.
Yep.
And very many beautiful compensatory effects for such a use of...
For such a use of their will, yes.
Will,
For this person's use of their desire to share with this person,
yes.
There's beautiful compensatory effects for this person because they just even wanted to share that one desire. Yeah. Just by giving them the thought. This is what I'm saying is your words, often you think they fall on deaf ears, right? But they don't. You know, it's not always like that. You never know when they're going to go, that thought, which is an energy that is measurable, and sure, thoughts are lower energy than emotions, but they're still energies that are measurable. Once they enter a person, it's very hard for them to stop that thought. You know? It's very hard for them to go, I know. But then they have this internal thing going, maybe not, maybe, can't be true. Yeah, it might be true. You know what I mean? And it causes them to wonder. And often just wonder is the development of a desire, right?
When we're speaking about a divine transformation, though, a redemptive process, there is the person involved with the sin within them has to be fully desirous to experience that emotional pain and sin and so forth.
With God.
With God.
Yes.
But then there is this thing that happens with God, with that person, where God can actually mitigate that experience of pain. And I suppose my core question was...
Well, the question becomes, who created this faith, though?
Sure.
Which is the true trigger of the actual thing that eventually happens. So here we've got God's soul ready to supply love anyway. He's ready to redeem us. He's ready to transform us. He's ready to heal us all the time. There's no inconsistency with God. He's ready to do all of those things every time, right? But it only involves this soul getting into a faith-based desirous condition enough for that to happen. Who triggered that? This soul triggered that.
But they don't have the capacity that God has to... Still, God is acting to mitigate the experience of pain. That soul is not? This is my question, really.
Yes, they have to still obey the law.
Yes.
Divine redemption occurs through God doing it, not another person doing it. So they've still got to engage the law. But who did what is still like, this person is still having a permanent effect, which was the question.
Yes, I see.
This person is still having a permanent effect on this soul by actually helping that soul have a desirous faith that triggers the events that subsequently follow. Does that make sense?
Thank you, my darling. Yeah.
Does that make sense to everyone? Does that make sense to you, David?
Yeah, thanks. May I clear that up with our question?
Yeah. Sometimes it's good because what I like about conversations with my girl is that she's very good of looking at problems, trying to find all the different possibilities and asking questions about it. This is what I notice many of you don't do. Many of you sort of have a little problem with it. You go, oh, you just ignore that problem and move on. Mary doesn't do that. And when you think about it, did you do that as a child? If you had a little problem with it? Did you ever move on? No, you didn't, did you? You go, no, I don't understand still. What's going on? Why? I don't get it. Oh, then when the penny drops, it's like, now it's fine. I'm okay with that. Can you see that? That's what you did as a child. But what do you do as an adult? And you go, no, I don't get it. No, I don't get it. I can't tell them that I don't get it because maybe I look a bit stupid not getting it or whatever. And that turns off this desire-based investigative process. Do you see? Now that's a problem. You've got to start seeing that as a problem. You want to be inquisitive, not for the point of voicing doubts and criticism and all that, but in order to have resolution of what the problem is for you. Does that make sense? So allow that process to continue. Yeah. Hopefully that's answered the question properly though, David.
Thanks.
Yeah. What did I have here? Jane, where are you? You're down in the corner there, so let's go to you. Now, you had a number of questions again, but if we can use your... I don't know which one this is, but when we have become at one with God, that one.
When we have become at one with God, are we still somewhat rejecting God's design by the illusion of separation until we reach soul union?
Okay, this is a good question, isn't it? Basically, the question is saying, if we rub this out for a sec, we're basically saying if we are a soul, half of a soul, we think like this still, we're half of the soul, right? We're thinking we're separate from the other half. We've now become at one with God, right? Is it possible for a soul to become at one with God while still thinking that it's separate? Is the question really, isn't it? And the answer is no, it can't actually happen. One half of the soul must be aware that the other half exists and must be aware that it needs to make desire-based choices to join with that other half before it can become at one with God. Why, some of you seem disappointed at that. The reason why is that this soul, to become at one with God, has to be aware of the soul's potential. And part of the soul's potential is to join, so it has to be aware that that potential exists and that it should desire it. And if it doesn't desire it, it cannot become at one with God, because that's what God desires for it. Do you see? So while it hasn't actually become a completed, aware being yet, it must at least desire to do so in order to become at one with God. So if you do not desire the other half of you, you will never become at one with God. Now, many of you, remember in group 2, we talked about this becoming aware of self process, and many of you were very challenged by that. Remember, you were saying, I'm going to put off the whole thing until I'll put off sorting out my soulmate issues until I become at one with God. Have I just said that's possible? No. And I also said it wasn't possible in the second group, if you remember. So the reality is you must at least be aware that's possible, and the half that has become at one with God would also completely desire it to occur and be searching for their mate, wherever their mate is, and searching for the mechanisms by which they could assist that process to occur. That make sense? So yes, this question. So the question that Jane asked basically is asking whether we are still rejecting God's design. No, we're not rejecting God's design. We just have a lack of desire, or the other person has a lack of desire for it to actually be completed. Does that make sense? But we definitely would not be rejecting God's design at this point, because if we reject God's design, we cannot become at one with God. At one with God means we accept all of God's designs, including the design of the soul, our very self.
Okay.
Follow?
Yeah.
Yep. Very important to understand. Important to understand for your future, of course. Now, Patty, where are you? Down here. So if we come down to Patty, how are we going time-wise? And have I lost my time altogether? Yeah, I have actually. Well, I could keep going answering all these questions. What we may have to do is stop it there, because we will answer all of our the questions that weren't answered sometime in the future. Some of them I feel have already been answered, and this confuses me a bit, because frequently many of you don't hear my answers. And in fact, some of you are asking questions that you've asked 20 times before and I've answered 20 times before, and you still haven't heard the answer. So that's a bit of an issue, isn't it? Means that you're not open to listening to answers, so why would I answer it again, you know? It's not go over the material that we've used before. But with the questions that we have not answered before, we will get together and answer in the Transformational Principles Q&A, so we won't be able to do that. Sorry, I just realised my time is way over, a couple of minutes over already, which will make the rest of the day over for us. Okay, so in summary of our transformation principles, can you see how important they are for your life in the future, and also that this transformation can begin right now? Isn't that great? Yeah. You don't have to wait until you're at a certain development, or wait until you know certain things, or wait till you understand a whole heap of things. The key is you don't even have to wait until sin is gone from you. You don't have to wait for any of that, because all of the transformational principles are activated by desire, not will, desire. Right? And this is where I feel we can become very neglectful of our potential. We think we've got to clear away a whole heap of things from our will before we can actuate desire. But we don't. We can actuate desire at any point in our lives, no matter how dark our lives are. We can actuate desire and begin the transformational change. We've just got to be aware that it's possible and desire to do it. That's all we've got to do. And the awareness that it's possible, as you can see from my discussion with Maxine, you can see the awareness that's possible is governed by a lot of our desire to be aware. Because let's face it, we're all getting the same signals from God to become aware. We're just in different places when it comes to our choice to observe those signals and do something about them. So my suggestion is you've had plenty of signals for many, many years to do, and you know what to do, so do something about it. Stop putting it off. Because every time you just put it off another year, you just get the penalties in that year for putting it off. The penalties are you're never going to be happier, you're never going to be more fulfilled than you currently are. They're the penalties. It's not going to get worse for you, but it's not going to get better either. That's the penalty. Wouldn't it be better that you play in the playground rather than miss out on it? Now that you're aware it exists, why wouldn't you play in it? There can only be some emotions that cause you to not want to play in a playground that you're aware of. Isn't that true? So deal with those emotions and get going. Play in the playground. This is where we need to go. When we understand these principles, that's what we'll finish up doing. We'll stop putting everything off all the time. Stop putting it off because we're afraid of people, afraid of what they'll do to us, afraid of what they'll say to us, how they treat us, what they might do, what the spirits might do to us. We're not afraid of any of those things anymore because we know. Desire drives everything. If you let people influence your desire negatively, then of course you're only going to get some negative results. Don't let people influence a positive desire. Don't let them influence it negatively. Allow these positive desires to build and develop within you because they drive your transformation. They also drive your redemption, but they drive your transformation. They also drive all of your subsequent creations. The creations that you can finally produce are all driven by desire. So it doesn't make sense to shut down desire just because of past hurt or past experiences or how people might treat you or what they might do to you as a result of you having those desires. None of that makes sense. Just engage the transformational process by engaging desire. Okay. Well, we'll have a 10-minute break. That means we'll be back at 3:25. Thanks. And we'll have our final discussion with you for the group. Let's go.